For most, Sarasota is paradise. Perfect weather, beautiful homes, and the #1 beach in America. People from all over come to visit, but for some, they come to live out their darker fantasies. Prostitution is rampant in Florida. With 3 football teams, 2 professional basketball teams, and countless college campuses, the demand for sex is high. In 2016, the Sarasota Police Department alone made 86 arrests for soliciting a prostitute. Most of the women arrested for prostitution are found on Route 41, or as Sarasotans call it, the North Trail. With 16 motels in a 1-mile radius, sex can be found on almost every corner. The Street Crimes Unit in the Sarasota Police Department patrols the North Trail, arresting the women. One of those officers is Dimitri. He's been in law enforcement for 23 years, but Dimitri joined the Street Crimes Unit in 2012.
I remember working in areas where there was a lot of prostitution, like on the North Trail, and driving by these women and, really not stopping to really think about who they were and where they came from and why they were out there. I just almost assumed, just like everyone else, that, they wanted to be there. And really that drugs was the driving force behind them being out there.
Sarasota is the second biggest drug market in Florida, and prostitutes are some of the most active consumers. This gives the police extra motivation to make arrests.
How many chances are we going to give these women? We gave them one chance. They said they wanted to go to jail and they're back out on the street. Oh well, forget about them.
80% of prostitutes return to the street after being arrested, for good reason. The estimated 1 million prostitutes in the United States generate $14.5 billion a year. One of the women that Dimitri arrested was Kelly. Kelly grew up in a loving home, but everything changed when she was 16 and prescribed opiates.
My addiction had started years earlier, being prescribed opiates. That addiction started spiraling.
Her parents kicked her out, which brought her to Florida. But with no money and no home, Kelly found herself in shelters. It was then that she met her trafficker.
I was approached by a man who offered to protect me, comfort me, and just provide things for me that I wasn't able to provide for myself. And soon into our relationship is when he started coaching me and grooming me and really teaching me how to be a prostitute. And if I didn't do what he said, that I could be killed.
It's women like Kelly that inspired the government to create the Trafficked Victims Protection Act, which states any woman manipulated into sex is a victim.
The Victims of Violence and Trafficking Protection Act aims to prevent trafficking in persons, provide protection and assistance to those who have been trafficked, and strengthen prosecution and punishment for those who are responsible for the trafficking.
But this new mentality didn't trickle down to Sarasota.
Selah Freedom came to us and said, hey, we want to help you with your sex trafficking problem. And our response was, what are you talking about? We don't have a sex trafficking problem. We have some open air prostitution, up on our main track, North Miami Trail, but that's all we've got.
Selah Freedom is a local nonprofit that works with the police to change their perception of prostitutes, from criminals to victims. The police now attend training classes taught by Didi, a case manager for Selah Freedom.
It's helping them understand that these women that we serve have this history of being exploited as a child.
Visible signs of abuse, of course. If you see marks of what maybe looks like somebody grabbed their arm and they're very hesitant to really explain what's going on and where they got that from. Or maybe
Didi gives the police real case files to work with, to equip them for what they will face on the street.
Some of the red flags we tell them about, there will be like layers of blankets on the bed, so they can quickly just remove a layer of a blanket when they're having the next John come in. Or there could be a counting system where they have like a deck of cards where they're moving one over to the other. So that's like a possible counting system. Just things to see on scene when they're dealing with these women or even men in some cases So they kind of go, wait, that's not normal.
These girls are around. They can be used anywhere from 14 to 40 times a day. So that's a significant amount of money. And you can see, this is always one of my favorites because obviously K-Mac is her trafficker. So if you see another girl with that tattoo, you know that she's more than likely being trafficked by the same guy.
We deem them as criminals. Come to find out, after being educated on the topic, these women are victims. They come from a lifetime of trauma and victimization. And in fact, what we were doing was continuing the victimization process. These are women that went to school here in Sarasota, that came from the high schools that my kids go to. At once probably had a promising life and maybe still have a promising life, but they need a little extra help.
To stop this process, the police work with Sail of Freedom to connect with the prostitutes. They tried to reach the women first by scanning Backpage, a legal website for prostitution.
She's holding a phone, so it looks like she's taking her own picture. A lot of times, though, they'll warn you about like stockings and kids' types of clothing. Children will wear it.
By posing as Johns, they can almost guarantee a response from the prostitutes.
Oh, we got a good morning. Would you like to schedule? How much time am I looking to spend?
This system is so elaborate that many women and their traffickers created their own language using emojis.
It's payment, essentially. They don't want to say money because they're afraid if they say money, they can be arrested for it. But if they say roses, that they can't be arrested. And she obviously was really concerned about that by asking about law enforcement and stuff ahead of time.
But most women started catching on to this method of communication. So the Sarasota police decided a more effective tactic was to meet these women in person.
The more they see us, the more we're around them, the more they're trusting of us. That has been the bridge, basically, for Sarasota Police Department.
To learn how to build relationships with the women, Dee Dee rides along with the police during Sail of Freedom's outreach hours. Here, Dee Dee checks in with the women on the street, while also showing the police how to interact with the prostitutes. One officer that rides along is Jessica Sullivan. Jessica also works as protection. The women are often watched by their trafficker.
Who we got? Who is this? And there's a guy right there.
Yeah, he's watching kind of close.
Which means Dee Dee and Misty can't approach the prostitute without
Probably
Jessica.
looks like he's watching them. I'd like to know who they are.
He's concerned for their safety.
Of course he is. Right.
In this case, the trafficker was waiting outside as the prostitute stopped for some water.
Want to go buy a soda with me, Dee Dee?
Yeah, we could do that.
Dee Dee and Misty followed them in.
Okay. Use a Diet Mountain Dew. I'm feeling it.
Need anything to drink?
The prostitutes told Dee Dee and Misty that they were okay, but were scared and couldn't talk. Misty gave them a card, hoping they would call in the future.
That was really good, actually. Dang, but that makes me so mad that he's standing out there with her.
Yeah, and the other one would not say a word.
She wouldn't even look at us, the other girl.
It was through this process that the police met Kelly.
They would also come find me sometimes on the street with law enforcement officers, not in attempts to arrest me or get me for doing something wrong, but to offer me services. And at that time, I just wasn't ready to accept them until I was finally arrested.
You're just Sailor people. Yeah. Hey, how are you?
Like Kelly, this woman was offered services multiple times, but isn't ready to give up the life. Instead, Dee Dee and Misty ask her about her drug habit and her housing situation.
Got her drug usage down to 2 days from 7 days. And she's got a job. She's living in a house down here, and there's no drug dealing going on.
She was a part of our first op. We got her in the very first one.
She's actually very nice.
She is. She always is.
Jessica hears a call over the radio and recognizes the name. It's from one of the prostitutes she's built a relationship with. Although other officers are dispatched to this domestic dispute call, Jessica decides to go too. After an extensive conversation, the prostitute makes a promise with Jessica to start getting clean.
She said she's gonna call me today and she wants out. We've brought her on once before. So we'll see if she calls today.
But I stopped.
Me too. That was a good contact today. It was really good. Thank you.
I pinky swore with her. She's like, I talked to them and I said I'd call you guys in an hour. So I went like this. And she pinky promised me. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna hold. You need to do that. You need to call them. You don't deserve this. She's like, I know. And I'm like, do you know? Do you really know that? Because I know that.
20 minutes after leaving the scene, Jessica gets another call about the same woman. This time, it's related to sex trafficking.
Yeah. I'll go swing over there and see if she'll talk to me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Bye. We're gonna go back and talk to Angela. I guess she told one of the officers when we left, this black guy named Tank is running 2 girls out of the sundial.
Jessica talks to the probation officer and the prostitute about the call. She decides the information is credible and wants to investigate the claims further.
But she drew us a map, so I know which room. So we'll go swing over there and see anything. So, but he was running her out of there too. So.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, that's how she knows all it. And I guess he's selling a ton of heroin and crack out of there. So we're gonna go through the sundial, and she drew me a map of what hotel room.
Very accurate.
Yes. It's upside down.
Oh, right. That's where the room is.
Yeah. So we're gonna pull in, and it'll be on the right.
Even though Jessica didn't find anything, it was an important moment for her. Her efforts during outreach were working.
But she's always been very upfront with me and honest and stuff. So I do believe her.
Prostitution arrests have gone down in Sarasota by 20% in 2017. Now that the police are treating prostitutes as victims, their focus has turned to the Johns.
These are so tight.
All right, we'll fix them.
Oh my God. I've never done this before. Oh my God.
A lot of people say that prostitution comes along with addiction, but that's not true. This is men preying on vulnerable women and using their addiction as leverage to exploit them. The scariest part is not knowing whether I was going to live or die. There were Johns that carried guns, they were aggressive, they were on drugs, and they were unpredictable.
It was like, okay, let's get the Johns now, and let's go after the pimps.
I remember grabbing the rest of the squad up and going, we're doing this. This is real, we're doing it. And then from then on, we were 100% plugged in.
Of the melody, although you can still see him, looks like a white male, orange shirt.
Here's how it works. The police will send out an undercover cop to pose as a prostitute. She's wearing a wireless mic that can be heard on all the walkie-talkies.
She's at the
Hey.
What's up?
Look
Come on,
for
let's
me.
go.
Where you going?
Crazy, let's go.
Going crazy? I can go crazy. I got a room right there, number 8, Flamingo.
Yeah, come on.
You want to
let's
go crazy?
Come on.
I don't get in cars, man. I got the fuck beat out of me before. I ain't
Never
feeling
beat out
nothing.
of you. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know you.
Where are we going?
Right here, room number 8.
Let's go.
What you want?
All right, stand by, good
I got
conversation.
money, we get
How
high.
much you got cash?
I got like $60.
You got $60.
Want to get high?
You want to get high?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Stand by, we can feel.
In order for the police to arrest the John, the undercover cop has to get him to say he will pay her for sex.
You give me the 60
Yeah.
for fuck?
No, I want to get high though first.
You want to get high and then fuck?
Yeah.
All right.
All right, come on.
$60. I'll meet you at room 8.
All right, good deal. 60 for sex. You're gonna have dope on him. She's walking over to the parking lot, Flamingo parking lot.
Good
Let
deal,
him get in
good
the parking
deal.
lot.
60
He'll take him in.
Sex.
He's coming into the parking lot right now from our unit. Let's let him get a little bit deeper in there. All right, he's underneath the carport area. Go ahead.
From there, the John will be brought to a substation where he will be questioned. Even though all their efforts are directed at the Johns, it can still be hard to prove intent.
We've lost some cases where they've said, well, he didn't go through with it and he abandoned the crime. I'm like, they never go through with it. We can't let the guy fuck the undercover. So what are you talking about? This is a crime of words. How far do we need to take it?
Still, Dimitri has a few tricks up his sleeve.
These Johns, the ones that are frequent flyers, they know the drill. They know that if the girl doesn't get in the car, they're the cops and they leave. We started taking their tags and then sending a letter home. Your car was seen on this date of someone's wife or whoever getting this letter going. What's this about? You've got some explaining to do.
The average boy has been exposed to porn by 8 years old. By 12 years old, you have boys hiding secrets and addiction already. Meanwhile, you have a little girl that's been used for sex, and a boy is thinking, oh my gosh, these girls must love this. I've seen it my whole life. So they don't even know that they're perpetuating the abuse of a survivor of sexual abuse her entire life.
By trapping the men soliciting prostitutes, the police were able to charge all 6 men with misdemeanors and felonies. Even though the police have changed their approach, they still have to arrest the prostitutes. But instead of sending them back onto the street, the police bring the women to detox centers. Once they are clean, the women are brought to court. But this is a special courtroom.
The court process was safe, which I think is really important. It was a closed courtroom, and there were police presence, so no outside members of the community could come into the courtroom.
You want them to not be drug addicted. You want them to work on their personal and mental health, which is a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder, and to continue in that continuum of care for the long term.
Judge Quartermain presents the women with Selah's diversionary program. One woman who chose to enter Selah Freedom was Tess.
Yeah, I'm just ready.
How old are you?
29.
So that was 2013. So you were 25. Is that the first time you went to jail? No, when you're
I
younger.
was 21. I need to get this done
Yes.
so my kids can have their mother.
Yeah. How old are your kids?
My son, he's 10 and my daughter, she's 8.
Yeah, they don't want to see you in jail.
There have been more people charged with prostitution than solicitation because it is easier to catch a prostitute. So how are you going to use law enforcement resources, and how are you going to address both sides?
This courtroom was also used for prosecuting Ronald McBride, Sarasota's first human trafficking case. McBride was holding a woman hostage for months. One night, she came home a little later than usual. McBride was paranoid, thinking she stole his money, so he pistol whipped her, stripped her, performed a cavity search, and threatened to kill her. She ran to find help.
McBride was found guilty of human trafficking, the first time ever locally.
If they do have a pimp, he's been the love for a while. It's been the protector, the one that's been there for her. Now they're leaving him behind. It's such a hard concept for them to really be like, what do you mean you love me? So what do you want in return? It's hard to change your life from something that you're absolutely used to.
Once the women finish their sentence and are ready to leave the life, they will enter the Selah Freedom residential housing, where they're given resources to get on their feet. If they make it through short-term housing, they are moved to long-term, but the residential program is one grueling year. They confront their addictions, trauma, and fears. While hundreds will go through the short-term housing, only 8 will be taken into long-term.
Selah itself means to pause, to rest, to reflect. These girls don't even know how to be still. They've never had a chance to just wonder, like, what do I love? It takes them months to learn to dream again.
Those months are filled with a packed schedule. The women study for their GED, take classes to learn new skills for work, and some start the process of getting their kids back. At the same time, the women are learning to love themselves.
Bringing freedom means to just bring back fully everything that a person is meant to be. So often, like, identity gets stolen, confidence gets stolen, and so the mission is to just rebuild every part of your life that was stolen.
All of the women will go to therapy with Dr. Quintel.
One of the roles that I have with Selah is to do trauma resolution treatment. The nature of what we now call post-traumatic stress syndrome or post-traumatic stress disorder is that something in their environment is reminding them of what they went through, and our brain emotionally has a tendency to confuse things that are similar, but mapping them as same. I'm really interested in framing what it is that we would want different for the person's life now. Once we get that, then it may lead to clearing out earlier stuff, but to me, it's really, how do we want to improve things for you in the now so that your life works better?
Kelly made it through the program, graduating as a trafficking victim advocate. Now, Kelly is working with Selah Freedom to help the women who were just like her.
For so long, I had been brainwashed into believing that my life was worth nothing, that I was expendable. I had men that put a price on my worth. And today, I know that I have a value that is priceless. I am confident in myself, and I know my worth as a woman and a human being, and the sky's the limit for me.
Kimberly is another Selah graduate who's moved on to independent living. She works as a nail technician, but decided to come back to Selah as a volunteer during outreach hours. These outreach hours are meant for women to get hygiene products, food, and water, a lot of which is not available to them while working on the street.
Now to watch the growth and how far you've come from that moment of I'm not worth saving, and look at all the wonderful things that you're accomplishing. I mean, you've gone to school, now you're raising up into a position of leadership. So I love that you would have that firsthand experience from like being in those shoes.
I had to hit my rock bottom. My rock bottom was my felony, my felonies, which are gone. So, yeah.
Kimberly is in the process of enrolling in college to get her degree.
The core of what we're trying to build with the community is that we can work hand in hand in trying to solve some of these issues that have been going on for years. Things evolve, society evolves, thought processes evolve, and we have to be open to knowing that there are other ideas out there that we probably haven't thought about, and we have to listen to them. It's touched my heart, really, to be able to be involved, because there's many people that are involved here in the mix. People here at the police department, from Selah Freedom, from the state attorney's office, the judges. This is a community effort. If my career ended today, I would feel like it was a success, like I did something positive as a police officer.